So good morning or good afternoon, depending where you're joining us from. I'm Julie Broadway, President at the American Horse Council. We're delighted to have you with us this afternoon for this webinar on these two important topics. Let me just begin by saying we are recording this session. So if you have to leave, you can come back and listen to the recording probably in the next day or two. We'll have it posted on the website. We are going to ask you all to put yourself on mute so we don't have a whole lot of background noise and we don't disturb the speakers. If you have a question, we encourage you, you've gotten used to this during the pandemic, put your question in the chat box and we'll be monitoring the chat and we'll circle back to the questions. So that's a little bit of some logistics to get us started. With me today are Bridget Shea, our Government Affairs Liaison, and Emily Stearns, our Health, Welfare, and Regulatory Affairs Liaison, and they'll be playing a role in this little webinar here shortly. Before we go any further, though, we would really like to thank our sponsors of today's webinar, which is Jarvis Insurance. They've been a great corporate sponsor of the American Horse Council, and I have a very short little commercial video to share with you if my computer is cooperating.
See, Jarvis Insurance is the leading international equine insurance agency in the world. Our team of professionals is here to assist you 24/7, and we offer worldwide coverage for all aspects of equine insurance. We are owned and operated by a family of horsemen, so you can rest assured that we have a pulse on the industry, and we'll look out for you every step of the way.
So I hope you enjoyed that. We want to say a special thanks to Kimberly Jarvis and her team over at Jarvis Insurance for all of their support of the American Horse Council and the things that we do. So with that, again, thank you for joining us. Our first topic today is on the Farm Bill. And the Farm Bill covers a lot of stuff. Everything ranging from farmer support to community food access, and was last signed into law in 2018. So that means it's up for its 5-year renewal this year. The House and Senate Committees on Agriculture have been hard at work trying to hold hearings, reviewing the budget, looking at program submissions, and honing all their math skills, doing everything they can to try to figure out how to bring this in within the confines of their budget and on time, if at all possible. So there's lots of work going on, and I think that the appeals right now are somewhere approaching the $1 trillion mark for this particular piece of legislation. So what we're going to do for the first portion of this is we're going to kind of get a look behind the scenes into the Farm Bill and learn how it can affect you and your horses and your business. So with that, I'm going to ask Bridget if she would introduce our first speaker.
It is my pleasure to introduce Justina Graff. She joins us from the House Committee on Agriculture, where she serves as a senior legislative assistant, focusing on livestock, animal welfare, trade, and international food aid. She grew up on a 6th-generation farm and ranch in Hondo, Texas, and received a degree in agricultural economics from Texas A&M University. Justina started her career in DC with an internship on the House Agriculture Committee and has since worked both on the Hill and in the private sector. So we welcome you, Justina, and thank you for taking some time out from your very busy schedule.
And I just want to add, Bridget, I understand, or Justina, you set me straight. You've worked in a number of different associations, including the National Milk Producers Federation and the Organic Produce Association. So you've been around the space a while.
So I worked on behalf of them in my role when I went off the Hill. I worked for an ag and food lobbying firm here in DC. So I was able to work with NMPF and the Organic Produce Association in that way. But yes, had a great time working with them. But first, wanted to say thank you all for having me here today. I really appreciate the invite. And as Bridget said, I grew up on a 6th-generation farm and ranch in Hondo, Texas, which is near San Antonio, for those of you who don't know where the teeny tiny town of Hondo is. I grew up around cattle. We had a cow-calf operation, row crops, and my parents also ventured into agritourism, which they have been doing in addition to the traditional ag for about 20 years now. So I've always been in and around agriculture and knew I wanted to pursue a career in agriculture. Wasn't quite sure how I wanted to do that and was lucky enough to end up in the ag policy space. So started my career in DC with an internship and returned back to DC for the House Agriculture Committee, then went off the Hill for a couple of years and returned back to the committee in February of this year. So in my role as a senior legislative assistant on the committee, like was mentioned, I work on livestock, animal welfare, trade, and international food aid, work in those portfolio areas. So most of that is done within Title III of the Farm Bill, which is the trade title. And then the majority of the livestock and animal welfare provisions are done within Title 12 of the Farm Bill, which is the miscellaneous provision. It has long been requested by industry that there not be a standalone livestock title, and we plan to keep it that way. So I'm mostly within Title III and Title 12. A few fun facts about the committee that I'm sure most of y'all already know about, but the committee was actually created in 1820, and it at the time only had 7 members. So we've grown a little bit since then. Now we are at 54 members and we have 6 subcommittees. So that growth reflects the growth in population in the US and around the world, as well as growth in the number of members here in Congress. It is chaired by my boss. It's G.T. Thompson from Pennsylvania. He's the chairman of the committee, and he is a great man to work for. Thankful to have such a good boss. And then the ranking member is David Scott from Georgia. And, you know, we have on the committee, the Farm Bill is really our bread and butter. We have jurisdiction over almost all ag-related issues in the U.S. There is sometimes some jurisdictional overlap between different committees, depending on what is put into a proposed bill or proposed amendment. But most of the time it will go to the Ag Committee. There's a bit of an exception. A lot of the FDA issues go to the Energy and Commerce Committee because they have jurisdiction over the FDA. We do not. But we do work closely with those committees when we have jurisdictional overlap. And we are lucky on the committee to have a bipartisan working relationship, which in today's political climate is not necessarily normal. So there's about 30 Republicans here on staff on the majority side and 15 Democrats or so on the minority side. And we are really lucky to have a good working relationship between both ends. So just a little bit of overview to start off, and then happy to dive into the discussion portion if y'all are ready.
Why don't you give us a little bit of a snapshot of the Farm Bill? What does it do? Can you sort of give us a little tutorial on the authorization versus the appropriation process, mandatory funding versus appropriations process? Sort of how does all that work?
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that the Farm Bill covers a lot of ground. We really do. There are 12 titles, and that covers anything from disaster assistance to crop insurance, to the Supplemental Food Assistance Program, or SNAP, formerly known as food stamps. We also have the trade provisions, international food aid provisions, conservation programs for producers. So it's really a large swath of things that we cover, and it is reauthorized, as you mentioned, every 5 years or so. And, you know, the Farm Bill was originally enacted in 1933, and it was born out of the drop in prices that we saw in commodity prices after the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression and the First World War. And it was enacted as a way to have a safety net for producers. And it has changed a little bit from the one that we saw originally in 1933 to what we have now, but it really still just remains absolutely imperative to our country from a food security side and a national security side. You will see my boss say all the time, and others on the committee as well say all the time, that food security is national security, and that remains as true as ever. We saw that with the COVID pandemic. We saw it and continue to see it with Russia and Ukraine. So the Farm Bill is what streamlines and drives all of the ag policy that helps to alleviate these types of issues that we see come up. And, you know, I know there's been a lot of talk about the funding. It's expected to be a $1.6 trillion farm bill. Those are the estimates we have now. So that is a high price tag, and we definitely recognize that, but you really cannot find a better return on investment. I think it would be hard pressed to find another piece of legislation like this that spends a certain amount of money and then has such a great return on investment. You know, this current farm bill that we are working on is expected to account for less than 2% of the entire federal budget for fiscal years 2024 to 2033. And with that investment, we'll see 43 million jobs, $2.3 trillion in wages. We'll see $718 billion in tax revenue, $183 billion in exports, and $7.4 trillion in economic activity. So it is really a driving force for the ag industry, absolutely, but for the overall economy as a whole. And then on the authorizing and appropriating side, you know, there's two different types of committees in Congress. There are authorizing committees and there are appropriating committees. We are the authorizers on the ag committee. So we can create programs, change programs, you know, modify them however we see fit based on industry recommendations during the Farm Bill reauthorization process, but we can only provide mandatory funding for them. And as within any budget, whether it's in Congress or in the private sector or at home, we operate under budgetary constraints. So there's only a certain amount of money that we can provide, a certain amount of mandatory funding that we can provide for these programs. And then working in tangent with the authorizing committees, we have the appropriations committees in both the House and the Senate, and they provide discretionary funding for programs. So the appropriation bills are taken up every year. I'm sure you've seen things in the news in past weeks and months about what the appropriating committees are working on for fiscal year 24. Mandatory funding is considered permanent, but it can obviously be increased or decreased during reauthorization processes such as the Farm Bill.
Justina, thank you so much for that background, that tutorial, because in Washington, D.C., speak doesn't always translate into normal conversations. So this was really helpful background. Over the past few months, actually since January, we've seen a lot of outreach from Chairman Thompson and ranking member and members of the committee. They've gone across the country, West Coast, East Coast, Midwest, everywhere, holding listening sessions for constituents. And you've also put out a survey that I think many of our members of the American Horse Council sent in some comments. In a recent interview, Chairman Thompson said, "There are days that I get input from hundreds of people." He said, "This is how you write a very effective farm bill, by bringing all those voices to the table." How in the world does staff sort through all of those emails, phone calls, standing up at a listening session? How do you sort them out? How do you prioritize them? And what kind of impact does this have for the process itself? Is it I'm sure it adds time to it, but hopefully it sharpens focus as time goes on, but would like to hear your take on it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned the two portals that we had. We had one portal that was for members of Congress only, and then we had a portal that was for industry stakeholders such as yourselves. So those closed, I believe, back in mid-June, and since then staff has just been poring over those submissions and separating out recommendations and issue areas based on title, and then further within each title based on, you know, which subsection it is relative to. And we are still doing that right now. We're pretty much done, and all of those recommendations, both from the member portal and from the stakeholder portal, are being shared with the relative staffers. And then our economist is also running different formulas in Excel that I, to be honest with you, don't know how he runs these formulas, but he is running formulas within Excel to show the percentage, you know, how often a certain request was mentioned both by members and then both by industry stakeholders. So we have the entire breakdown by title of what was submitted in both portals, and then we have a further breakdown of percentages based on keywords, bill numbers, programs that are already within existence at USDA, things that we've been hearing, frankly, probably since the last Farm Bill. We've just, plugged those in and have compiled that information and shared with the correct staff. As you mentioned, there's also been a lot of listening sessions and tours on the ground. And I think the chairman has been to over 42 states by now in the past 2 years. And he has filled probably at least a dozen notebooks. He is great at taking notes during these listening sessions. And then there's, of course, always staff on hand. Been lucky to travel with him a handful of times. And we are also there at the listening sessions, taking notes and reporting back to the higher ups and to our colleagues with all of that information. So it has been a large task, but it's been a very good task. And I think it's been a very effective way for us to hear from industry about what they would like to see in the Farm Bill. And, communication and collaboration within the Republican side of the committee, of course, but then obviously with our counterparts as well is really key. And we strive to keep those channels open. So
we do a lot of research at the American Horse Council, and I can only imagine what it's taking to go through all of those notes, looking for those keywords, trying to find the themes that are there, trying to just process everything that you've heard from everybody. Just out of curiosity, how do you feel that process is working? Are you starting to glean some things from what you've gotten?
Absolutely, yeah. We like I said, it's been a large task, but it's been really effective. And already we've been able to look at the data we have and determine, okay, this has been mentioned a lot. This was mentioned a little bit by a certain region of groups or members. So it's been very effective, and it has been something that we are looking at in all discussions as we are actively right now writing our titles. So it's been very helpful, and I think it's been a great process. And especially in today's day and age with technology, the way it is, it's just been, I think, one of the easiest ways that we can get the information that we need to hear from industry. So it's been a great process, in my opinion.
Bridget, I know you've got a follow-up question, but Justina, what it makes me think of is when we do research, we often use, what are they called, Emily? Word clouds, which take all the words and, bubble them up, how big they were, how often they were said. And I can only imagine what that's like.
Be a pretty big word cloud, I think. But
I think so
there's
too.
a lot of people on committee who are a lot smarter than me with technology, who have been breaking down all the information and putting it into nice lists where we can read it and understand it. So yeah, it's been great.
Bridget, did you have a follow-up question?
I did, and that's a very impressive process. Because even more so because Julie and I and Emily have often talked about all of the proposals that have been put forward by stakeholders, constituents that they want the Farm Bill to address. Some make perfect sense to us, others not so much. And within the 12 titles, obviously there's a lot of reach there, and I'm always interested in how the Farm Bill got connected with cryptocurrency and things of that nature. But does it seem, when you talk to the other staff members, that this year the pressure is even higher for funding and authorization from the Farm Bill because of the tight budgetary constraints that Congress is facing?
Yeah, I came in my internship right after the last Farm Bill was passed, so I unfortunately cannot speak from firsthand experience about what happened in the negotiation processes in the last Farm Bill. But the budgetary constraints that we're operating under are pretty tight, and that has definitely been in all conversations. It feels like that we have both internally and with stakeholders, to incorporate these requests. One of the first things we have to look at is how much money that we have to work with. And across 12 titles, the money can seem like it's getting stretched thin, and how are we going to allocate that? But, that's our job, and figuring out how to allocate the funding that we do have available is a huge part of the process. But yes, it has seemed to be a difficult issue, I suppose, is the way to fund it, because we would love to tell people, oh, yep, we see where you're coming from, and we would, we'll help you out and we'll give you the funding and the programs. But unfortunately, we can't just outright say that. We have to say, all right, where is that money going to come from? Do we pull it from another title? Do we pull it, from something else? So it has been an interesting process, to say the least, and I think it will remain that way until it's done.
So Bridget, this might be a good time for you to share with the listeners today, what are the things that we're campaigning for in the Farm Bill from the American Horse Council and the horse industry's point of view?
We do have a list, and we've checked it several times. And obviously we don't want to put you on the spot, but we want our listeners and our members to know how we're interacting with committee staff and committee. Foremost on our list, and I think that was the first time Julie and I met you, we came in to talk to you about the horse census. And that is something that we believe is necessary, because the current way that the Department of Agriculture counts horses is based on whether or not these animals are located on a production farm. So a lot of them are missed in the count. And our contention is these missed animals have repercussions for public health, because some of them can carry zoonotic diseases that can be transferred to human. And it certainly has serious impact for equine health, because we need to know where these horses are in case there is an outbreak. We have talked to the National Agriculture Statistics Service. They gave us a price tag, which I will mention, of $15 million to conduct this study. And we're hoping that it will get some consideration, if not full funding. And I'm going to make a pitch, and Julie will probably weigh in on. The American Horse Council also does a companion piece to the census, which is our economic impact study, which really drives home the amount of money the equine industry pumps into the U.S. economy, and it is significant. So therefore, we think an accurate census will fill out the picture of what this industry contributes, what its needs are, and what its potential growth is. And again, this has everything to do from equine health, public health, to land use decisions, to a company deciding to start a new brand of performance saddles or pharmaceuticals. It is a major business. Then we're going to submit some asks for disease prevention and disease research. That includes a national animal disease preparedness and response program, and the vaccine bank, and the laboratory network, to name three of them. Again, most of these programs within USDA do not have set-asides for equine health. And again, we'd like to see that happen in the future, that we have separate allocations for equines, and that we're not included in with other livestock. Related to that is a request for the Horse Protection Act, which addresses horse welfare issues, especially one involving the horse soaring situation. And there is a standalone bill right now in the House to increase inspections and methodologies for detecting horse soaring. And we're asking for full funding of that for $4 million. I said I wasn't going to mention money, but I am. And of course, an important part of the equine industry are our vets who take care of us and our horses. And there is, if it's not a full-blown crisis already, it's looming, that there is a severe shortage of equine veterinarians. And so we're working with two of the other veterinarian organizations and asking for funding for the veterinarian loan program. And this is where the government would provide some loan forgiveness for those young veterinarians who would agree to locate to certain areas of the country that have a shortage. So that in a nutshell is our to-do list that we're going to be submitting to your committee for consultation and consideration.
And I'm so pleased. GT Thompson has been a big proponent of the horse industry. He has a passion for horses. I know on his little journey around the country, he's been out to the Virginia Horse Center. He's been to Tennessee to visit with some farms there. He's really taken the opportunity to kind of pick the brains of people in our space. So we're excited about the fact that he's sort of spearheading this, and hopeful that that means we'll get a little consideration on some of these matters here.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we're continuing to go through all of these submissions that we've received across the board. The three-legged stools, so-called three-legged stool between the National Animal Disease Preparedness Centers and the Animal Health Laboratories and the Vaccine Bank obviously has a lot of support across industry, and we recognize that. And on the census side, you know, as I'm sure you all can imagine, there are a lot of different segments of industry that want to see increased funding and increased research for NAS. And we are looking at those requests individually, and we are also looking overall if there are updates that need to be made to NAS to kind of bring them into the 21st century and have their data be more up to par with the data that we see in the private sector. So we definitely hear you on all of these asks, and I can tell you they are coming up in discussions, of course, and we will continue to do, as you said, consultation and consideration of these issues. And I think one of the key things to flag here as well is what you all do from the education side in Congress is absolutely critical. You know, there's over 200 members of the House that have never voted on a farm bill, and there's about a quarter of the Senate that has never voted on a farm bill. So it is obviously our job as staff to educate members, but we really, really rely on industry to do exactly what y'all are doing and come up to Washington, D.C. and meet with committee staff, but also meet with members and staff that are off the committee, because at the end of the day, it takes 218 votes in the House to pass a farm bill. So we need buy-in, of course, from our members on the committee, but from the entire House of Representatives as well. So the education you all do is absolutely critical.
Well, and we know that there's a lot of members of Congress who are not from an ag background, or especially a horse-related background. So that is a large piece of what we do is education. Just I feel like we do it all the time. Bridget, I'm going to kind of segue back and make this offer to Justina and to GT Thompson, which is we're doing that National Economic Impact Study this year. The results will be out, maybe a little too late for you to take them into full account, but we should have some preliminary numbers. So as you guys start weighing all these things, feel free to reach out to us at AHC, and we'll provide you with whatever data we might have that could help with that. You probably know there are four major sectors to the horse industry: racing, competition and showing, recreational trail riding, and then what we call our working horse division, which is mounted horses, horses used in equine assisted services or therapy facilities, dude ranch horses. There's lots and lots of categories that are there. And so we're collecting data from all of those various sectors out there. And we should have some really nice numbers by the time we get around to about the end of September, 1st of October, which takes me to the question, Bridget, I think is looming on all our minds. I think your deadline, Justina, is end of September, the 1st of October to try to make this thing happen. You see that possibly occurring or not?
Yep, so you're correct. The Farm Bill technically expires at the end of September. We have been given orders from the chairman that he wants a bipartisan, bicameral, effective Farm Bill done on time, and we are marching forward with those orders. Mentioned earlier, most members and staff go home during the August recess, which is upcoming. We do not have plans to go home. We have plans to stay here in DC and work the entire time. So we are moving forward with plans to get this done on time, as the chairman has repeatedly stated and asked of us. So we are drafting and writing our titles right now, and plan to have something ready to go in September. Obviously, there are things outside of our control sometimes that might affect that process, but the chairman, and I believe he has buy-in from all four corners on this, would really love to see something done on time. So that is what we are working full steam ahead towards. But yeah, that is the big question, and it is important to note that a lot of the Farm Bill funding will go through the end of the year. It will not just lapse at the end of September. So it is good to have that cushion. But again, we want to fulfill the chairman's wishes of getting it done on time, and that's what we're planning for.
Great, thank you. Now, Bridget, you shared a story with me this morning that recently came out from the Senate Ag Chair, saying that she thinks that there might be a little bit of play there on that deadline. What did you hear?
Yes, it was a story reported in Politico that she expressed skepticism that the bill would be done on time, and basically said it's not the end of the world that's happened before. And as you said, Justina, there will be money through the end of the year, the calendar year, and that there's been delays before. You put a patch on it and you go back to work, and then you figure it out and you get it passed. And I think I understand organizations and stakeholders wanting to create a sense of urgency, but I think it's also important for people to understand that the sky will not fall, that cows, horses will still be exported, imported, and the health measures that the USDA provides the livestock industry will be full speed ahead.
Absolutely. Yep. Like I said, most of the funding within the Farm Bill remains there through the end of the year. And as you said, Bridget, if it were to lapse, the sky would not fall. And one of the things that the chairman is obviously very, very concerned about is the Farm Bill being effective. He says all the time that anybody can just pass a Farm Bill if you just want to pass a Farm Bill, but he wants it to be effective. And with it being on time, it being effective is one of his, I would say the top priority. He wants it to be workable for industry, for producers, for consumers. So, yeah.
Well, keep up the good work. That's great. Okay, Bridget, I think what we'll do here is sort of wrap up, and we'll take some questions. So if anybody in the audience has a question, put it in the chat. We'll get around to those. I will say for the listeners that the American Horse Council has drafted a letter to go to both the House and Senate Ag committees, outlining what our ask is and explaining the reasons for our ask. If you are interested in weighing in on any of this, by all means, reach out to Bridget or myself or Emily, and we'd be happy to take your comments and your thoughts about that. We're trying really hard to do that education piece, make sure we're clear about why we're asking for what we're asking for and the reasons that we're asking for it, and just doing the best we can to try to have everyone as informed as we possibly can about why we're asking for what we're asking. So does anybody in the audience have a question for Justina or Bridget or myself at this point?
I think I've seen it. Sorry, I just clicked on my chat box and I've seen a few sent directly to myself, and I'm happy to send. One of them was for my contact information. I'm happy to send you all have my email already, but if that would be helpful to be sent out, please feel more than welcome to do so. Just first and last name at mail.house.gov. So
thank you. We appreciate that kind offer. Again, if you joined us in progress, we are recording this session, so you can go back and listen to it in its entirety. It'll probably take us a day or so to get it posted, but we'll be back out there. Justina, is there anything you want to close with? Any other remarks? Or Bridget, any other follow-up you feel like we need to do at this point? She's done a fabulous job of kind of giving us the big picture here.
yeah, I'd just like to say thank you again for having me, and feel free to reach out to us anytime. Myself and the entire staff who work on livestock and animal welfare issues are always happy to hear from you and happy to help however we can. And again, education is really key. There are a lot of members who have never voted on a farm bill, and a lot of members who do not have rural districts or understand the horse, livestock, animal welfare issues generally. So education is really key, and I think you all do a great job there. And again, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Well, Justina, it has been our pleasure, and I will say that you and your colleagues on staff are always accessible and always knowledgeable and always timely in response. And I wish we could clone you and sprinkle you about other offices and committees on the Hill. But you have
appreciate that.
you really set the standard for responsive help and knowledge, and we appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
We'll let you drop if you need to, but please feel free to hang on if you want and hear the next half of the webinar. Great, thank you. That takes us to our second topic today, which there's a little bit of a relationship, I think, which is right to repair. And so the right to repair or fair repair legislation protects you as a consumer if you would like to make repairs that might void the warranty, or at worst, you are concerned about what your rights are there. So this is the legal right for owners of devices and equipment to freely modify and repair products such as automobiles, electronics, or farm equipment. And so we're delighted to have with us today two Emilys to talk about this subject. So I'm going to turn to Emily Stearns, who's part of the American Horse Council staff, to say a few words and to introduce our speaker and talk about this subject.
Thank you, Julie. So we brought this topic up as it's something that is popping up in media, across the news. There's coming into question, even just as farm bill, as farm is very topical legislatively right now. So we thought we'd reach out to some experts on it. And today we have brought you Emily Buckman, who is joining us from the American Farm Bureau Federation as the Director of Government Affairs. Her portfolio includes appropriations, broadband, rural affairs, and technology. Emily joined AFBF after serving 2 years as the Director of National Affairs for the Kentucky Farm Bureau. She's previously worked on Capitol Hill for nearly a decade for Congressman Brett Guthrie from Kentucky, and as a senior policy advisor, and served as a policy advisor at the U.S. Department of Agriculture and Rural Development in the Food, Nutrition, and Consumer Services missions areas. While in these roles, she worked to advance policy and legislation on issues including agriculture, education, infrastructure, and workforce development. Emily was raised on her family's 4th-generation farm in central Kentucky, where her father and brother continue to grow corn, soybeans, and tobacco, as well as raise beef cattle and hogs. Emily holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in political science from Campbellsville University and lives in Washington, D.C. So Emily, we're really excited to have you here today to talk about what the Farm Bureau has been doing with Right to Repair and hopefully help some of our members understand what's been happening.
Well, thank you, Emily, for that introduction. I appreciate it. I feel like I'm home, coming from horse country originally. I did not grow up in a horse family, but through my time on Capitol Hill, and just by default being from Kentucky, I've been around your organization a fair amount, as well as other horse stakeholders. So as you just mentioned, American Farm Bureau has been very engaged this year on Right to Repair. And what I'm going to do today is just walk you all through our process for obtaining memorandums of understanding with various ag equipment manufacturers over the course of the last 6 months. So I'll start from the beginning on how this came about, and then I will walk you all through our progress over the last couple of months. So Right to Repair actually, let me step back. I'm sure most of you all are familiar with American Farm Bureau, but me as a lobbyist, I get my marching orders from our policy development that takes place at the grassroots level. So the only steps that I can take are stem from our grassroots members that vote on policy each year that our team here in Washington have to adhere to. So we do have policy on right to repair. And as Julie mentioned, in its simplest form, right to repair is essentially having access to the tools to self-repair. Our members really started to get engaged in this discussion a few years ago. And our board decided that we wanted to take action on pursuing memorandums of understanding after we have been hearing from members over the last several years talking about lag time in getting equipment repaired. There were some questions of whether dealerships were consolidating because they were having a hard time getting folks to come to their farm. And we all know productivity is lost when machinery is down. So it became a top issue for our organization. And in 2021, our board actually gave us the direction to go and engage with ag equipment manufacturers to secure right to repair MOUs. Our members, our farmers and ranchers, wanted to seek a private sector solution rather than a legislative solution. So that is what we have been aiming for ever since we got that directive. Fast forward to January 2023. After several years of discussing this with John Deere, we were able to announce an agreement with John Deere. So in January, we have our annual convention, and we were able to announce the agreement there. And just to kind of walk you through the agreements, one, in order to get to this point, we hired outside counsel. So not only do we have a cross-functional team here at AFBF, we did hire outside counsel. We also, President Duvall appointed a sounding board with representatives from each region to serve as the voice for our membership. And then we also consulted with an internal working group that we have called the Technology Issue Advisory Committee, which is comprised of various county leaders across the country. So after conversations with them and with Deere, we were able to get to this final agreement. So that was our first one. We got to work and we continue to move forward, which now brings us to 5 agreements in 6 months with different manufacturers. And each of those agreements are tailored to the manufacturer and are nationwide in scope. Each one explicitly says that our members in independent repair shops have access to manuals that includes operator parts and service manuals, product guides, the ability to directly purchase diagnostic tools from the manufacturers, as well as outlines a direct path for members to reach a manufacturer to resolve any repair issues that arise, which we see as a more effective solution than having a farmer ranger file a state consumer fraud claim under state law. So that brings us to about 75% coverage of the U.S. market share for ag equipment and tractors. We are very excited for the momentum that we have at the moment. Because we have 5 agreements in place, we certainly are focused on implementation of those agreements. They are very new. We just hit that 6-month mark with John Deere, and as part of these MOUs, we as an organization and then the manufacturer have agreed to come to the table at least twice a year to discuss what's working with the MOUs, what can be improved, update them accordingly. So if new technologies come out that need to be reflected, that's something that we are able to discuss. Now that we have so many on the books, we are focused on maintaining that. So we will be meeting with Deere to discuss the MOU's progress so far. Obviously, it's new, so we are soliciting feedback daily from our membership. Our presidents from all 50 states were just in town in Washington last week, which provided us an opportunity to engage them on what they are seeing. We have really held steady with this approach because we do believe at the end of the day that through the MOU, where we have outward commitment by manufacturers to provide these tools. And because of our structure as an organization, we do believe that farmers and ranchers and independent repair shops will have a much better opportunity at finding a resolution. Obviously, we saw that Colorado passed a piece of legislation on ag equipment related to right to repair back in the spring. That is the first piece of right to repair legislation related to ag equipment. Actually, in that piece of legislation, legislators acknowledged our work on the MOUs and even put language in there that defers to the MOUs, whether they're in place now or in the future. So we were pleased to see that, although we are clearly more dedicated to this MOU approach, and that's how we're going, until our members tell us otherwise, we are going to hold true to that path and continue to move forward. Obviously, and for those of you all who are not as familiar with our announcements, we have agreements in place with John Deere, Case New Holland, AGCO, Kubota, and Kloss. So those are the guys that we have MOUs with currently. We plan to engage other manufacturers. While we believe we've got the big guys now on the record, we will continue to see if there's other opportunities, if other folks are interested in engaging with us. We have received positive feedback from our membership, and a key component to these agreements and something that we've agreed to is that we will educate members on what's available to them. So we are currently developing messaging material for folks. We have developed a landing page on our website, and we just hope that by getting the word out there, that folks will be able to see the benefit of that. Something that we've certainly learned over the course of these last several years while having these discussions and trying to craft these documents is that, dealer to dealer, it's just going to be different. And that's just how that model is set up. Not everybody's going to have a great relationship with their dealer. Much like if you went to a fast food restaurant in one county and the next county over, you get different treatment. However, we believe that if we give these MOUs time, that our members will be served to the best that they can be, and will be able to get equipment back up and running when it is in fact down, so that they can continue on with their day-to-day business. So Emily, with that, I will, I think was a 2 p.m. cutoff. So I'd rather, if anybody has specific questions or if you all do, I'd be happy to take those. I'm also going to put in the chat, if folks are interested, I need to make sure that I'm going to do this properly because I think I'm currently, I'll put in the chat.
We'll share it to your contact information.
Yes, that would be great. And I will, I was going to link to the MOUs so that, I'll link to one of the MOUs so that folks can see it if they have an interest in it. All of those are available on our website.
Right. So, it occurs to me, Emily's, that one of the things we could do to help you guys with this is through our network of state horse councils. If you'd like to send us whatever collateral or materials you put together, we can disseminate that through our sector and get the word out about this. So Ms. Stearns, I'll turn to you for follow-up questions.
Yeah, and this follow-up question, it comes from the chat, and we had been talking about it previously. So Emily, what do you feel like the benefits of pursuing MOUs versus legislation have been?
So our membership in general was seeing obviously various pieces of legislation across the country pop up. And depending on what part of the country you're in, you would hear more feedback over others. And seeing obviously at the federal level, it takes a little more time for things to get moving. Our members had discussed it, and they decided to take the private sector solution route. The way that we see it is, if we as an organization and manufacturer as an entity can work it out, provide that pathway for members to have a direct conversation, we think that ultimately that is going to be a much quicker resolution than a member having to go through a process of regulatory red tape, if you will. I mentioned, Colorado passed a piece of legislation. I don't know how much momentum. I mean, we haven't seen any other states actually pass a piece of legislation. We will see how that is implemented here in January. And that might shed a little bit more light on what it would look like. But at the federal level, we just haven't been seeing much movement. And quite frankly, we have always, just as an organization, think that less government is more. So we're hopeful that if we give these MOUs some time, that our members will see the full benefit of them. And, we're committed to continue to have those conversations with manufacturers. And if there are other folks that, want to engage with us, we are certainly open to that. Because the more that we get out there, the better, and the more education we provide, the better off our members will be. But we also see this too, as we've committed to come to the table and review these MOUs at minimum twice a year, which how often does legislation get reviewed, fixed? I mean, we were just talking about the Farm Bill, right? That's every 5 years, and that, we'll see what happens before September 30th. But we see it as we have committed publicly to having these sit downs at least twice a year, which gives us the opportunity to fix, change things, amend things to benefit our members even more.
Awesome. So talking about your members, I have kind of a two-parter question. One is, do you have to be a member of the Farm Bureau to benefit from these MOUs? And further, if I'm a equipment owner and I feel like the manufacturer is not holding up their end of the bargain, how would I go about seeing the MOU enforced?
So so that's a great question, and we will definitely be finessing this as we have our first meeting with manufacturer. But the way that it should work, honestly, is, so yes, it's an agreement between Farm Bureau and the entities. So AFBF, our team here, what we've deemed as the right to repair team, are kind of the folks that are the point of contacts, if you will. So we, through our state networks, have been trying to disseminate that. We've been telling our state counterparts that if anything arises, please reach out to us, and then we will get it to the manufacturers, because we've been dealing with our counterparts here in Washington. And then obviously they're the ones communicating with their dealers. Mm-hmm. And we, in theory, only get involved when the dealer doesn't take care of the problem. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, we want the problem to be resolved there at the dealer level. However, our members are empowered to share with their state leadership and then ultimately to us, so that if we do need to get involved, that's when we'll come into play. We've seen this work where for instance, in our technology issue advisory committee, that group that I mentioned earlier, that's comprised of county members from across the country. There were some concerns raised by a member there, and we were able to just get the concern out, right? Just kind of get a full picture of what the issue was. And then we were able to contact John Deere directly and have that conversation. And I think that what we're really going to see as the year goes on is that, we're going to learn, AFBF in particular is going to learn a whole lot more about that dealer model and just what folks are offering in various parts of the country, each state, which is something that, we get different perspectives on, from depending on what state I'm talking to. I hear something different.
So this will benefit everybody, but you're kind of taking feedback at the state level.
We are, yes.
So for those that are listening in and you're not currently an American Horse Council member, please bear in mind that we do have partnerships with John Deere and a number of these manufacturers. We can offer you discounts. So if you need to buy a piece of equipment, that's an opportunity out there. Also, this year we're doing a national economic impact study. I mentioned that earlier in the webinar, and we're offering incentives to get you to complete the survey out there. So one of the prizes you can win is a John Deere piece of equipment. So there's a lot of overlap and a lot of opportunities for us to collaborate with American Farm Bureau Federation on some of these things. So anybody else have a follow-up question for Emily Buckman? Because we're getting close to the top of the hour, and I've got a few little wrap-up remarks that I want to make before we close.
If there are no other questions, I will throw out that I will make sure to share any information with Emily that might be maybe of value to you all down the road, just to kind of learn a little bit more. If you need to collaborate, if you're a Farm Bureau member as well, or have folks in your community that have feedback or need to be in touch with us, I'll make sure that Emily gets that material if you all have any additional questions.
Great, thank you so much. Emily Stearns, anything else you want to say in closing on this topic?
No, I just wanted to thank Emily and Farm Bureau for their time, because it's been really helpful to have kind of direct from the source information. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate that. Okay, folks, so we're approaching the end, and I just wanted to remind you, we recorded today's session. It should be up and available maybe in the next day or two, so go back to our website. We will certainly include a link in our upcoming newsletter, which is going to go out on this Friday. Lots of great content in the newsletter this Friday. Also, I'm going to give a shameless plug for our podcast. The American Horse Council is doing a podcast once a month. It's on Horses in the Morning Radio Network, and it comes out the first Tuesday of the month. So we've got some great content there if you'd like to learn more about that. We do take submissions and suggestions for topics for our upcoming webinars. So we'll have another one in a few months, and would welcome any kind of suggestions that you guys might like to offer. So please, by all means, reach out to us. Any of us can be reached at our email address. It's our first initial, last name at horsecouncil.org. So very simple, jbroadway@horsecouncil.org, and so forth and so on. So at any rate, we hope that you've enjoyed this. We hope you found it informative and helpful. And we look forward to seeing you on one of our next webinars. So with that, thank you again, everyone, for joining, and I hope you have a great Monday.